What's up, boys? The pigs are back for another episode of the Blind Pig Podcast, courtesy of bgobsession.com. Obviously, if you've been here before, thank you for joining us again. If you're new to the site or new to us, you can also catch us on YouTube if you're listening. You can catch us on all the audio platforms if you're watching. And you can catch us on all socials, including Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and, of course, you can catch us at bgobsession.com. So hook us up, join the site. It's totally free. We got some contests going on. I think we got like 2 days left for the crystal ball pool, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, you can still join the NFL Pick'em really at any time. Just the later you join, the harder it's going to be to catch up. But we got an NFL Pick'em where you pick every game's winner every week all the way through the Super Bowl. And then we've got the crystal ball pool, which is a really tough one because there you got to pick who are all the playoff team's going to be and who's going to win what games to get to the Super Bowl and win the Super Bowl. So that one's really tough. But yeah, you still got a few days. Well, you got about 12 hours for the crystal ball pool, but but yeah,
and the last thing we just had our fantasy football draft, and I went with the ever controversial pick of Christian McCaffrey at 1 overall. If I'm not mistaken, Bob went full auto draft theory here. That's going to be his how he's going to win the league, and it was an interesting 14-team league, or 12-team. So,
like Bob said, Bob has to figure out what to do with 2 kickers and 2 defenses.
I already cut a kicker. I did keep a defense inadvertently. I picked Cleveland, and yes, Derek's right. I went full auto draft, not intentionally. For the record, the 1 year I have won our league was mostly auto draft.
Yeah,
and I pulled the whole thing into some semblance of a winning team. But I picked 2 kickers and 2 defenses, which inadvertently did well for me because I picked Cleveland. I want long term, I think. But they play Dallas this weekend, and I'm not thrilled about that. But Minnesota, they have the New York Giants. That's a winner right there.
Yeah, I'm a pick a different defense every week, kind of a fantasy football player. But I did take Washington this time just for sentimental reasons.
That's for well. Hopefully that paid some dividends. So we finally made it, fellas. We are days away from football that counts.
Day away.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm talking specific to the Commanders, but yes, a day away. Tomorrow, there's real football. By the way, let me just say that the schedule makers knew what they were doing this year. Chiefs, Ravens, followed by Eagles, Packers was great, but they totally dropped the ball, putting them in a stadium that doesn't allow the color green in Brazil. I don't know if you guys were aware of this.
What?
The Eagles and the Packers are playing in Brazil on Friday night. The stadium is a soccer stadium. Their rival team is green, so they have banned the fans from wearing the color green in that stadium.
Did they ban the teams from wearing green? Do like both teams have to wear alternate uniforms or something?
Well, that's the other. So from what I've been told, what I've understood is the Eagles are going to be wearing their black alternates, and the Packers are going to be have gotten special privilege from the soccer team to wear their uniforms.
Dumb.
I mean, you guys are the soccer fans. All I'm saying is that's outside of my purview.
John, I don't know what you think about this, but to me, this is just evidence that the United States in general, because the league offices are in the U.S. and they're probably populated mostly by Americans, really do not understand soccer culture in the world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I don't care. So let's move on.
There you go. That's true.
All right, boys. We got real football. The Commanders taking on the Bucs, 4:25 on Sunday in Tampa. I think this is going to be a sneaky good game. But I don't know. We can get into predictions later. But how are you guys feeling coming off the 2 weeks? Big news today. Also, before we get into that, 2 things. Brandon Coleman, full participant at practice. I don't know if you guys were aware of that. That is a big time positive, which means at a minimum he's going to have 3 days, 2 full practices, and the walkthrough before the travel day on Saturday. And then the other big news of the day was Sam Cosmi signing an extension, 4 years, 72 million, 74 million. Comes out to 18.5 million per year. I think it was somewhere just north of 50 guaranteed, which ironically enough, I believe was very similar to the Brandon Sheriff contract that we all applauded us for not paying. Granted, it was 5 years ago.
48 guaranteed, but yeah.
But what's your reaction to Cosmi? 4 years, big time money. I think he's top 20 money, maybe even top 10, not 100%, but that's a pretty good annual value for a guy who's moved out of the tackle position in the guard.
It's always good when a good player wants to stay here. And even with all the uncertainty, starting over, that may be one of the reasons he wants to be here is that we started over. But I just he's got a mean streak, and we need that. And I think that's why he's here. And I think that's why he's, in addition to playing well, he's kind of developed a little bit of a nasty reputation and a nasty streak. And I think they love that about him. So I like it.
Yeah, I was thrilled. I watched the 12-minute press conference that Cos did today after practice, and you just got to love this guy. You really got to love this guy. I mean, he very carefully, somebody asked him about, getting better and what his goals were, and did he have individual goals, and he all but said he felt like he had an all-pro year last year and didn't get the nod for the all-pro team because he played for a losing franchise. I mean, he was very politically correct about it, but he said, look, we all know there's politics involved in this. And I feel like I had an all-pro year last year. And now I feel like I've got an organization around me that's going to allow that to be recognized. And I was like, I also really dug the fact apparently people get reduced to initials now in Ashburn. It was AP this and DQ that, and he never used anybody's full name. It was just initials. But it was a fun press conference, and Sam seems excited about it. And more importantly, Sam didn't seem excited about the money. He seemed excited about having some place that he was thrilled to be at and wanted to come to work, wanted to play, and was surrounded by other people of like mind. That was the impression I got from it. The money felt very secondary to me. So could be wrong, but that's the way it felt.
Yeah. 45 million guaranteed. That kind of puts money off the table to a normal person. You're like, I don't ever have to worry about money again. I mean, great,
yep.
Right?
And I believe
they asked him about the money, and he said, you guys got to understand, I didn't come from money. He said, guys, my rookie contract was big dough,
Mm-hmm.
He said, I can't even wrap my head around what this is because I've made more money already. He's like, this is, he was, again, very diplomatic about everything, but you could tell that he's just appreciative of the opportunity and wants to work hard and get better.
Yeah, I think it's also a big deal that you've now got Tyler Biotish under contract for the next 3 years, Sam Cosmi under contract for the next 4 years, and you've drafted at minimum a tackle. Now, I'm not going to say Coleman's going to be a starting left tackle. I would love it if it works out that way. I think that might ultimately be I guess I shouldn't say, I don't know how to say this without saying, but the best pick in the draft. Obviously, Jaden Daniels is going to have the biggest influence, but if you find your starting left tackle in the 3rd round, that's a massive home run. And you do it the same year you draft a rookie quarterback. But now you've taken a question mark that we've had for years in this offensive line, and you've changed 3 of the 4 starting positions, and the one that stuck, you just gave him a big money deal because he's the best player as a holdover. So the offensive line very quickly next offseason could go from being a total weakness to a total strength, depending on how the next 17 games goes and then the next offseason. So I think this is an awesome move. Huh? Cosme deserves it. I think he's Pro Bowl caliber. I think he's all pro caliber. He hasn't gotten there yet. He's not there yet, but I think he's got the ability to do it. So, on to actual football matters, and we can touch on the off the field drama after we talk about football. But Sunday, 4:25 in Tampa against the Bucs. How are you guys feeling?
Well, before we get into how we feel, I think that we need to have a disclaimer, which is the disclaimer is that we had 61% turnover on our roster and almost 100% turnover of our coaching staff. Not quite 100%, but damn near it. So I think the one thing that we just got to say before, and this goes for Sunday and it goes for the rest of the season, nobody knows what the hell is going to happen and what kind of a team this is going to be. I think there's a lot of positivity, and we're going to probably hear some of that tonight. But there's just no way of knowing. So, but that's what makes it one of the most exciting seasons we've had, and which we've been talking about quite a bit. And I think the first thing we need to start with is the Bucs. Like what do we know about them from last season? I'm not gonna go on a big diatribe, but they did win. With 9 wins, they won the NFC South for the second season in a row. I think the season before it with Tom Brady, they won 8 games and won the NFC South. So they're not exactly in a powerhouse conference there. They beat the Eagles in the wild card game, and then they lost to Detroit. Baker Mayfield had a season that we'd be pretty thrilled with compared to what we've seen over the last 5 seasons. He threw for 4,000 yards, completed 64% of his passes, 28 touchdowns, 10 interceptions, sacked 40 times, which unless you have Sam Howell under center, that's a hell of a lot of sacks. I feel like here's how I'm going to sum up what I think about the Bucs in general. They can't stop the run. Excuse me. They cannot run the ball, and very well. They didn't have 1,000-yard rusher. They had Rashad White, who ran for his 900 yards and a handful of touchdowns. I think they were 32nd in yards rushing for the second season in a row. And for those mathematicians out there, that's last in the NFL, which is hard to do. And I guess the other thing I would say is they're not very good at defending the pass. Those are the 2 things that jumped out at me. Is they were close to last in the league in passing defense last season. They've changed up some of their secondary, et cetera. But so those are the 2 big things that jumped out at me just in general about the Bucs. And I think the other thing, and then I'll let you guys chime in on what we think of the Bucs in general, is I guess Baker Mayfield. You wonder. We've seen a lot of versions of Baker Mayfield over the years, from kind of turnover machine to making big mistakes in high pressure moments to looking like an amazing quarterback. Like I said, he played well last year, but the competition that he played against was not the greatest in the world. But so I think that's a big part of it. Is just for the Bucs in general, is Mayfield kind of crossed the threshold where he's going to continue to get better, or was last year kind of the best you could expect?
Was that the outlier? Looking at their roster, I could make an argument that they watched the Blind Pig podcast, because have you seen their offensive line? 2020 first round pick Tristan Wirfs, if I'm not mistaken. We talked highly about him in our podcast.
Well, who's the other guy? You know who the other guy is.
2022 second round pick Luke Gadecki, who we talked about on this podcast.
Yeah.
2023 second round pick Cody Mauch, who we talked about on this podcast. 2024 first round pick Graham Barton.
And I talked about him last year. The Duke guy, the Duke tackle, who they've got at center, and who's
they've got to play at center.
And he's starting right as rookie.
Yeah, so that 4 of their 5 starting offensive linemen we have talked about heavily on this podcast. So just a weird anomaly, I guess, or maybe we just have a similar train of thought. So, but they've invested heavily in that offensive line, and they've still given up 40 sacks in the season. So that was 2 first rounders and 2 second rounders, and that Ben Bredesen, I don't know much about him. He's a 4th round pick back in 2020, 4-year vet, so he's not anything huge. But what jumps off the page at me with them is they're explosive. Mike Evans and Godwin can kill you. So I think that's going to be ultimately the story, is not necessarily our secondary, but can our pass rush and our interior pressure do what we need to do in order to kind of prevent Mayfield from just having a day. Because even if we had top 10 corners, Evans and Godwin can beat you up a little bit.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
Evans had almost 1,300 yards in receiving, and Godwin had over 1,000. So they didn't have a 1,000-yard rusher, but they had 2,000-yard plus receiver.
And interesting record that Evans holds, if I'm not mistaken, is he has the most consecutive seasons with 1,000 yards receiving, of which I don't believe he's ever logged a season in the NFL with less than 1,000 yards.
And guess
If
who
I'm not mistaken.
their third leading receiver last season was? It was Rashad White. Rashad White was their third leading receiver, so that's something to watch too.
If you're a fantasy guy, you know him because he is explosive in the pass game. So ultimately, offensively, for our defense, it's going to come down to, can we figure out a way to contain them? And it's not necessarily going to become in coverage. It's going to come in pass rush. It's going to come in making Mayfield uncomfortable. It's going to come in forcing them in passing situations. Go ahead, Bob.
I was just going to say, Evans is that type of wide receiver that just totally torched us last season too, right? He's 6'5" and 231. I mean, he's even bigger than DJ Moore and kid in Philadelphia, AJ Brown. Thank you. You know, big wide receivers had a heyday against our defense last year, and we really didn't upgrade the corners. I would throw out. So I was listening to Bram Weinstein earlier today, and he's saying that word out of Tampa from the press corps down there is that Jalen McMillan is kind of the guy that they've been keeping hidden all preseason because they didn't want the NFL to know about him. He's going to be the deep threat in that air game. And Weinstein's feeling was that the most important corner on the field for us this weekend might actually be Mr. Senristel. You know, playing that slot position and trying to contain a guy with a tremendous amount of speed, a big upside, and a huge deep threat. Or at least that's what the Tampa Bay media team is saying. So
I was watching a podcast, a Bucs podcast called Cannon Fire podcast. Pretty good podcast, and they were talking about him. They actually said he's the guy that. He's probably the secret weapon, just kind of like you framed it, Bob.
Yep. Yeah. The other thing, we're also talking about a huge strength for Tampa Bay against a unit that I think everybody is a little concerned about on the Washington side of the ball, at least the fans, right? I mean, we all kind of look at that core secondary unit, specifically the cornerbacks. And, you know, and your outside starting cornerbacks are the same as they were last year, St. Juste and Forbes. Now, you can say a lot of things. I mean, the coaching staff seems to be of the opinion that these guys got better during the preseason. They're not necessarily unhappy with them, but man, I saw a lot of questionable things happen in the preseason when those guys were on the field. Granted, it was mostly practice, but
I think Forbes is going to be this is the way I feel. I could be totally wrong. I hope I'm totally wrong. I think Forbes is on the bench in the first 3 games, and we'll see Williams come in to replace him. Or hell, they might move Senristel out there. But I think St. Juste is a better corner than – I'm not putting him in the same – and I'm not saying you did, Bob. I'm not as down on St. Juste, although he didn't play great last season, but he's shown some promise, early on. And I really think this season he might look a lot better with, a scheme that makes sense and coaches that know what they're doing. And so I'm not saying I'm not worried, but I just think we're going to look a lot better in the defensive backfield. And I think our safety room is stocked.
Yeah.
So I think we might be surprised that they're not as big a weak link as we think. But
yeah, and I don't disagree with that. I just, I think back to the spring when all of us were thinking, hey, they're going to they're going to sign a free agent cornerback. They're going to sign a number one cornerback, and once they didn't, well, they're going to draft a big cornerback for the outside, and then they drafted a guy for the inside. And so I think all of us kind of looked at it and went, man, what are they doing? Kind of like we did with the offensive line. And now the offensive line doesn't look so bad. So I think it's kind of one of those, maybe we should have a little more faith in Adam Peters and DQ, but
here's the good news. Here's the good news. If we're worried about them eating our secondary alive, the good news is that in 2023, the Bucs passing defense was 29th in the league in yards and 17th in scoring. So they're not very good. Their secondary is not very good. And I know they've got they've got Jamal Dean and Zion McCollum are the two starting corners. I don't know. I don't know that they've gotten a lot better there. So I'm just looking at how accurate Jaden Daniels is, and I'm thinking he might be able to take advantage of those cornerbacks.
Mm-hmm.
Just to tie a bow on back to the secondary, I will say, to your point, I think we're going to see a lot of things that are done schematically to help out the secondary. That with again interior pressure, blitzing, edge contain, things like that create problems for quarterbacks that we're not just trotting out the same guys and putting them 10 yards off the ball and saying don't let anybody get behind you, and then you still do it. So I think a lot of that's going to change. As far as their defense goes, I see guys like Antoine Winfield Jr. That's the guy you got to worry about.
They've got Vita Vea at nose tackle.
And Vita Vea is another guy.
Antoine Winfield Jr. is a pretty and that guy can blitz.
Mm-hmm.
Levante
David I believe he's a couple years removed from his peak, but at one point that guy was like defensive player of the year conversation, if I'm not mistaken, unless I'm thinking incorrectly.
No, you're correct.
They've got some guys, man. But I don't think that their defense is one that you look at and say
no. But Tampa Bay, they just seem like one of those teams that knows how to play defense.
And they grind. Yep.
They've got I don't know. You guys explain this to me, because they list two coaches, Larry Foote and Casey Rogers, as their defensive coordinator. And they've done that for several years. So I don't know if it's like they share the responsibility literally or how that works, but they do a pretty good job. The other guy on defense, they've got they let Devin White go, and KJ Britt, I think, is one of their kind of promising linebackers. So I expect it to be tough to run on them. Like I don't foresee us doing a lot of running up the gut against them. Like Brian Robinson Jr., this might not be the week for him to start his
right.
like we talked about last week, because they're tough. I think they were 5th overall against the run last year. They're tough against the run.
Another couple names that have made their name that have been talked about on this podcast also is Yaya Diaby, outside linebacker, as a pass rusher. We've talked about Bryce Hall, I believe we've talked about as a corner, out of UVA. He was a later round guy, and one guy we all talked about a lot was Servicea Dennis, out of Pitt, if I'm not mistaken. We all liked him as a later round guy last year. So again, I'm not saying they watch the podcast, but it sure seems like there's a lot of parallels to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the BGO Blind Pigs. But I think this team can be beat. to your point, John, and we can elaborate a little more into this as we look into this actual getting into our predictions. This team's played together now for 2 or 3 years. Bowles is a newer head coach, right? But he was there last year. Am I remembering correctly?
Yeah.
We're a new team, new coach, new quarterback. 61% of our roster turnover as of yesterday. There's going to be situated. I just think it's unfair for it to expect us to walk into an away team with a rookie quarterback making his first ever start in the NFL, running an offense he's never run before when it matters, with a team that's never run this offense or this defense or all of these things, and expect us to push them around. I think plays can be made, but we'll see what happens there.
So the guys on that podcast, the Cannon Fire podcast, they were concerned about this game. I think they played the Vikings in last year's opener, and they said, you go to Minnesota to open against the Vikings, you should be nervous, and you're gonna get punched in the mouth. But they said this game feels like it could be a trap game, and they're very knowledgeable about our team and about the offensive weapons that we have. So they're a little worried about us.
Mm-hmm.
I think this is a game that they actually should be worried about. Stop and consider for a moment. They've got all the same coaches, so there'll be some tweaks and some differences in the schemes that they run. But we've got a season plus worth of tape on what these coaches like to do with most of these players. They have nothing on this offense. Cliff Kingsbury hasn't called a play in the NFL in 4 years?
Yeah.
They have nothing on this offense. We have 4 starters left from last year on offense. One of them's a guard, one of them's a running back, one of them's a wide receiver. I mean, it actually, and one of them's a tackle. They don't know what they're going to see. And if Kingsbury played vanilla, which we kind of all think he probably did during the preseason, that's what the smartest coaches do.
And Witt, for that matter.
Yeah, and Witt, for that matter, right? They don't have a clue what they're going to see from either side of the ball. They've got to be a little concerned about the interior of their offensive line against Payne and Allen, but they don't know what's coming from the outside because we've completely turned our edge rushers over. We have a whole new linebacking core led by a consensus first ballot Hall of Famer at this point in time, right? The guy that's going to be lining the defense up is currently considered one of the smartest on-field football players in the NFL. It's got to be a little daunting if you're the Tampa Bay Buccaneers because you don't know what's coming for you on either side of the football, other than just what coaches have said in press conferences.
I saw another NFL analyst talking about kind of a random topic, but it was what rookie quarterback and wide receiver connection is going to be the most explosive across the league. And guess who the first quarterback and wide receiver they mentioned was?
Daniels and Terry. Daniels and McLaurin.
Daniels and McLaurin. And they made the same point that we've made a couple of times this offseason about McLaurin. One of the guys said, McLaurin's a sneaky good wide receiver that doesn't get the respect he deserves because look at who's been thrown to him for his entire career in Washington. And yet he's put up top of the league, top 5, top 10 wide receiver numbers every single year. And I just have to wonder, like, what are we going to be saying about Terry McLaurin at the end of this season compared to some of the others where he just had to fight for every reception he got? I think it might look a little different with Jaden Daniels thrown to him. That's all I'm saying.
I think you may be right. And the other thing is, we didn't see a lot of it in the preseason, but in the back of every single defender's mind with Tampa Bay is that kid under center can run. He can run. and that's in today's NFL, that's a scary prospect for defenses. Is you can't just defend 10 guys anymore for a lot of teams in the NFL, and now we're one of them.
Yeah, it creates that hesitation, right? Even if he doesn't do it a lot, they know they have to.
They have to think about it. They got to account for it.
Right. And so I want to back up for a quick second, digress to the very beginning of this podcast. Auto Draft gave me Jaden Daniels for my football team. I typically do not pick Washington Commanders because I do not want to be emotionally invested in my fantasy team.
Yeah.
In fact, I'm a guy that's won with a roster full of Dallas Cowboys because I don't want to be emotionally invested in my football team. And now I'm emotionally invested in my fantasy team, which kind of sucks, but I'm a little excited because he's that dual threat kind of guy. I mean, we saw it in the very first preseason game. Nothing was there in the air, so he takes the football and walked in for 6 yards for a touchdown. That's not something we've seen a lot of in Washington for a while. So a little excited there. And Tampa Bay's got to be a little concerned.
And it's not even if it's play called, you know what I mean? It's what's the old saying with wide receivers is if you're even, you're leaving. If we're even, I'm leaving. You know, if Jaden Daniels looks across, he knows that 90% of the middle linebackers that he sees directly across from him, he's going to beat them to the pylon, and he's going to do it comfortably, which opens up a lot of opportunities that you know, especially in the red zone.
Yeah.
Hey, I just wanted to mention one other little nugget about the Bucs that we didn't talk about. They've got a new offensive coordinator, Liam Cohen. He was offensive coordinator, I think, in 2022 with the Rams. I don't know whether that was because someone died, or whether he was the OC for the whole year, or what, or Sean McVay, or was really the OC and he kind of held the clipboard or whatever.
He was just a figurehead.
But anyway, I don't know anything about him, but that's got to be a factor, right? A brand new offensive coordinator.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah. All right, boys. Do we want to get on to some predictions real quick? John, what do you think? What's going to happen?
I'm going to start with our buddy Tony, who couldn't be here tonight. Yeah. He sent me a little snippet. So he said, he said, homerish, I know, but let's go. I think we see the first game evidence that we have our quarterback. I also think that Tampa last year maxed out the best they can be, which is a team that some years can make the playoffs in a weak division, but no major threat in the playoffs. Although the Eagles might have something to say about that. So a solid team, but not world beaters. I think B-Rob has a big game. Frankie, I love you, is all over the place. And the MVP is Quan Martin, covering for the outside corners and moving around the field in multiple spots at times. He's calling it 24-20 Commanders.
All right, 24-20 Washington. All right,
so,
what do you got?
So I feel like logically it's insane to pick the Commanders in this game. And if Mark were here, he would go ahead and continue on to say why he's not picking the Commanders in this game. But I just feel like there's so much positive energy around all of the changes in the locker room with the coaching staff. I don't think they really care about how much experience this group has or what the team has done in the past. I think they just are fired up. And I think we've got smart coaches. I think Cliff Kingsbury is going to be a really great OC for us. So I'm going to pick us to win 34-27 and somewhere late. I think it's going to be a ton of passes because, first of all, the Bucs can't run the ball, and we're pretty good. I think we're going to be a pretty good run-stopping team. So I don't see them handing the ball off a lot. And I think their corners are susceptible, their defensive secondaries susceptible, and that we're going to attack the hell out of it. So, like I said when we were starting out, I disagree with Tony. I don't think Robinson's going to have 150 yards on the ground, but I do think they might do a lot of throwing to like Austin Eckler, like little 5-yard past the line of scrimmage throws. Zach Ertz might be a big part in this game. And I think they're going to attack it in the short field. They're going to attack it more that way instead of trying to pound it against one of the league's best run-stopping teams. So anyway, and here's my prediction: how we get to 34-27 on the road with a 61% turnover roster. Mike Sanristel gets his first interception late in the third quarter, early fourth quarter, something like that, and that kind of turns the tide.
Wow.
What do you got, Bob?
You know, I've been back and forth all day long about what I was going to say here. 27-13, Washington. And the bold prediction is that Mr. Forbes gets his first NFL pick six.
Oh, Lord.
Well, you know,
Happened.
I'm looking at Dan Quinn and I'm looking at Joe Witt, and these are the guys that turned a 6th round rookie draft pick into the actually he wasn't a rookie, I guess he was a 2nd-year player, into the NFL record holder for pick sixes in a year last year. I'm not sure that I like Baker Mayfield. I'm kind of rooting for Baker Mayfield. You want to know the truth? I you know, the poor guy has had one hell of a career, and not in a good way, right? But he seems like a really nice kid. And so I'm kind of rooting for him in a way, although not on Sunday. I have a bad feeling, or a good feeling, I guess, if you're a Washington fan, that that Witt and Quinn are going to make Baker very uncomfortable for 4 quarters. I don't think they're going to give him much time. And those big outside receivers that he's got are great guys when they have a moment and he has a second to take a breathe, tap a football, and throw it. I don't think he's going to have a moment to take a breath, tap a football, and throw it. I think he's going to have to make very, very quick decisions, and I think he's going to have what looks on paper, at least, to be a very talented, very sack-happy front 7, or 8 or 9, depending upon how deep you want to go. I think they're going to kind of be all over him. At least that's my hope at this point in time. And it's going to make it really, really tough sledding for Tampa on offense. I think their defense will do all right. I mean, obviously, you know, when I say 27 and the defense is putting up 7, that means Daniels and company are really only scoring 20, right? 2 TDs and 2 field goals. But, yeah, it's kind of what I think at the moment. By the way, did Newton practice today? The last report I saw was he was going to full practice today, do light work tomorrow, and full practice on Friday. And then they were going to make a call on whether or not he's part of the game day roster on Saturday.
He wasn't on the injury report, was he?
No, that's just, I want to say I read this as reported out of Quinn's press conference.
Who were you talking about?
He was limited today.
Newton. He was limited today?
He was limited today, yes. So was Daron Payne and Trent Scott.
Well, Daron Payne limited means he's starting on Sunday. but they're being more careful with Newton. But I mean, typically there's a drop off in the interior of our line in terms of pass rush. There's not much drop off in terms of run defense. But we don't get the same type of rush out of the middle of the line when Allen and Payne start swapping out with other guys. I have a feeling Newton's going to change that this year. I'm going to be real curious to see if he plays on Sunday. Anyway, there you go. My thoughts.
Well, similar to you guys, I've been going back and forth. Well, similar to you, Bob, I've been going back and forth. John doesn't seem like he's been going back and forth. He's pretty rock solid.
Let me add one caveat. I don't know what the hell is going to happen in the season. Like, we could win 5 games and call it an improvement. I just think for this first game, there's just a lot of energy, and I just think that's sometimes teams get shellacked when that happens because they don't see it coming. Go ahead.
Yeah. I've got it written down, and I'm trying, like, my head is everything is telling me that Tampa Bay is going to win this game 27-23. You know what I mean? Like 23 would be a lot to like be kind of excited about, because if we put up 23, that means the offense was at least somewhat effective, more than we've seen in a while. I'm going to go to Tampa Bay 27-23. Just, I think it's a lot to ask a rookie quarterback to come in with to your point, Bob, only 4 returning starters on offense. And so, which means that 7 of them have never played with the guy standing next to them. And 7 of them, and then none of them played in this offense last year. You can say the same thing about the defense on the other side of the ball. I don't say this like I think I would say, and if we play them in week 10, I think we beat them. I just think it's early. I think there's an opportunity here for a lot of questions because of everything that's so new, which forces me to kind of hold back my excitement. But I think we can beat them. If we won 27-20, it would not shock me. But if I'm putting something on record,
Derek, to take your 7 guys are standing next to somebody new analogy, 3 guys, if you count McCaffrey, are playing in totally different leagues than they played in last year.
Right. So there's a lot.
And we're not talking about minor positions either. Quarterback and left tackle.
Right. So I just think there's a lot to there that I don't even want to say breeds problems, but I don't think it would be fair for me to expect them to be playing on the same level as a team that has widely been together.
I feel like shouting like Jim Moore. Expect.
Right.
Nobody said expect.
Right. 27-23 Tampa Bay. But I think we see enough that we look at it and we say, you know what? We're definitely going in the right direction.
Well, we're going to keep track of our predictions this season. So we'll come back next week and we'll see
the predictions.
We have a tendency not to want to remember what our predictions were.
Derek, are you putting together a master spreadsheet? Derek, for those of you at home that don't know, Derek is our spreadsheet master. He does spreadsheet work that's scary.
I'll put something together, and I'll put something together that we can share. We can run we can put a thread up that's got the BGO blind pig predictions or something, and hell, we can have other members submit their picks that we can read off on the pod if they want to. You know what I mean?
Yeah, we need to bug Mark. Mark needs to drop a prediction for us every week.
Chris,
Mark was a real man. He'd be getting up at 2:30
in the morning.
Podcast
absolutely.
From Anspach, and
I didn't say he had to be on the podcast, but he can drop it. He and Chris both. Chris, who's hanging out in Helsinki at the moment, so.
Well, we'll hopefully see Chris soon. I think he's on.
Truly a global organization here at BGO.
Yep.
And if we're not, we send people away so that we can be global.
Like prestige. Why?
That's right. Shout out to Nightingale, our resident UK member. I think we've got an Aussie on the board.
Oh yeah.
Right. So absolutely. We're equal opportunity degenerates. We don't care.
All right, so question, and if the answer is no, shoot me down. But are we doing our annual preseason? What does the end of the year look like for this team? Just a record.
Let's wait till we've had one game. Let's kick the can down the road 1 week.
Let it be known.
Something tells me the season prediction.
Former Marine just said, nope, not going there.
We're just attacking in a different direction. That's all.
Pardon me, not former. There are no former Marines.
That's right.
That's true. Well, anyways, fellas, it's been a pleasure. We can wrap this thing up at a decent time tonight. Before we do close, I want to get you guys. I don't know if you guys have heard. The VP of content has apparently come out and said some stupid shit. Found himself suspended. I would have a hard time believing he doesn't get fired after it. This can be a one-word answer. Do you care? Does it ruffle your feathers?
I don't really care. I think based on what I heard, I didn't hear the actual see the video clip or whatever audio clip, but I saw the text version of it. I just don't think it's compatible with what this new regime is about. So he might not be part of it. I mean, I'm not a big fan of like people will do something dumb, fire him. I'm not a big fan of that. Everyone has done stupid things, probably in the last month somewhere. And I'm not a big fan of like knee jerk firing people at all. But I do think it shows if that's how he really feels, he's probably not the right guy for that job.
Yeah, I would like to say I don't care, except for the fact that I do kind of care. And I care in that John, I think you're the guy that said it on the boards. This guy has president in his title. Granted, it's vice president, but he's got president in his title. And I'm sorry, I've worked in the corporate world for 30 plus years now. When you reach VP level, you should have more brain cells than this. You should know that the only place you can talk like this is at home in front of your wife. That when you get outside the house,
as long as you're getting a right,
yeah, exactly. As long as you're not in the middle of divorce proceedings, because then she'll use that against you. But you know, I mean, there's a time and a place, and he wasn't in the time and the place to vent in any way, shape, or form. Even if these aren't his real feelings, words have power. And unfortunately, he has now uttered some words that have a very negative energy to them. I don't know how big a deal if this team were not in the positive place that it is right now, he'd have no chance with this ownership group. But we're in such a positive place at the moment that honestly, it's kind of a blip on the radar, I think. In terms of
it's getting national attention, but nobody is coming out saying, "Oh, Commanders, same old Commanders," or
right. Yeah,
or,
exactly.
You know,
I didn't see those headlines.
That was the first thought I had, though. When I'm not gonna lie, when I saw that, I'm like, "Here we go again." Even now, we're gonna have this kind of crap.
Yeah, and so then the question is what do you do about it? And I, like John, am very much everybody makes mistakes and everybody should get a second chance. But when you're an executive, there is a different line for what constitutes getting a second chance and what doesn't constitute getting a second chance. And a private mistake that hurts the organization, but maybe nobody really understands how and why it hurts the organization is one thing. But for a guy that deals in content, he deals in media.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think he's probably a goner, but that's me.
Yeah, I think they acted swiftly. I think they've made it blatantly obvious that this is not something they're going to accept. They're not going to do a knee-jerk reaction. He's suspended while they run their own investigation, but they're also not going to allow this to be something, especially, like, I hate to say this, but because, this is so Redskins that 5 days before the opening game of what we all want to believe is the first game by our franchise quarterback in a new direction of the team, we have this kind of thing come out, where in years past, how would it have been handled? I think they're handling it the right way.
Well, at least he didn't try to drag a coworker into a limo against her will. So
that is true.
Got to put it in perspective.
He just called all of us fans high school graduate alcoholics, which
I think he's hanging out on the wrong message board, man. That's what I think.
But I resemble that fact.
In all honesty, Derek, I'd rather have him do that than order the media department to cook his own videotape of the cheerleaders shooting the calendar. I would much rather him do that.
There's a lot of things that
so there you go.
There's a lot of things that we live through that make this actually seem like a pretty minor deal, but it's not a minor deal, and they're handling it. And you know what? I didn't want to give it a ton of time, but I thought it was worth mentioning.
Yeah.
Kudos to them for the way that they're handling it, and it is kind of enlightening to know that there's actually a level of confidence that I have in my organization now that they're going to handle this the right way, and we don't have to worry about this thing lingering, or the fact that they played golf with Bruce Allen a couple times, which means now he's their boy, and they're going to find reasons to explain it away or whatever. It is what it is. We're 4 days away from a meaningful football game, so what more could we want? All right, fellas. Well, it's been a pleasure. I believe we're gonna try. If you're following along, if you're listening, if you made it this far, we really appreciate the support. Obviously, please subscribe, like, hook us up with a follow, and everything like that.
I just wanted to mention
believe.
one last thing, Derek. We have really great game day chats. As far as I know, we're the only Commanders fan forum that has game chats every Sunday. Pretty well attended. The only thing you got to do is join the site. It's free. Come join the site at BG Obsession, and come join us on Sunday. And we'll either be talking smack and celebrating, or we'll be trying to show empathy towards one another. One or the other.
And for those of you that stream, we are sympathetic to the streaming service. We try to generally be mindful of that when we talk. And it's an open community, man. And it's at the point now. I don't know about you guys. When it's game day, I'm locked up. I'm on my computer. My family knows it. I'm in my game day chat. I'm not interested. You know what I mean? Like mixing it up with you guys. I'll drown my sorrows with you guys, or celebrate the victories because it is enjoyable. So,
all right, guys.
Catch us next week. I think we're going to try to circle around and start doing these things on Tuesday nights. Is that right, John? Is that what we came up with?
I think we're going to shoot for Monday nights, but we're talking
Monday nights. Yeah, we still want it fresh. You know, we want the wounds to still be bleeding a little bit when we start talking about it. But hopefully that means we can have these things posted late Monday, early Tuesday. So make it appointment television. And next week we'll be rolling back around. So hook us up, and we look forward to seeing you back again.
Night, guys.
Night, fellas.
Night.